It's January in Antarctica, and a cargo ship has just docked at McMurdo Station, the largest research outpost on the continent. Over the next 10 days, the crew will unload 4,000 tons of food, working around the clock in shifts that don't stop. This isn't a routine delivery. It's the only one they'll get all year. If the ship fails to arrive, if sea ice blocks the channel, if the floating dock made of reinforced frozen seawater collapses under the weight of a 100-ton truck, the station faces evacuation. For the next 12 months, everything the crew eats will come from what's being unloaded right now. There are no grocery stores in Antarctica, no supply trucks, no emergency deliveries, and for half the year, no planes can land at all. This video will show how Antarctic research stations receive, store, and manage a year's worth of food in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. We'll look at the logistics of the single annual ship delivery, the engineering required to prevent food from being destroyed by extreme cold, the systems that ration fresh produce through 9 months of isolation, and the way food becomes the primary tool for keeping crews psychologically stable when resupply is impossible. McMurdo Station sits on the coast of Ross Island, about 850 miles from the South Pole. During the brief Antarctic summer, October through February, it's home to over 1,000 scientists, support staff, and logistics workers. But the station doesn't have the infrastructure to produce its own food. No farmland, no livestock, no fishing fleet. Everything has to come from somewhere else. That somewhere is Port Hueneme, California, or Christchurch, New Zealand, depending on the cargo. And it arrives on a single vessel during an operation called Deep Freeze, named after the Cold War-era military logistics program that still supplies the U.S. Antarctic program. The ship takes about 30 days to cross the Southern Ocean, navigating through pack ice and storm systems that can delay or reroute the journey. When it finally reaches McMurdo, it docks at an ice pier, a structure built entirely from seawater that has been frozen, flooded, and refrozen in layers over the course of several winters. The pier is thick enough to support heavy machinery, but it's still fundamentally a dock made of ice. If it cracks, if the mooring lines fail, if the ship can't get close enough to offload, the entire station's food supply is at risk. The cargo includes roughly 20 tons of flour, 10 tons of pasta, 5,000 gallons of milk in powdered or shelf-stable form, and millions of pounds of canned goods, frozen meat, and dry staples. It's not just food. There's also fuel, spare parts, scientific equipment, and construction materials. But food makes up the bulk of the weight. The goal is to deliver 98% of what the station will consume over the next 12 months in this single shipment. If the ship doesn't make it, if sea ice conditions are worse than expected, if the vessel is damaged in transit, if weather closes the approach window, the station has to shift into conservation mode. Meals get smaller, fresh food disappears immediately, and if reserves are low enough, non-essential personnel are evacuated before winter arrives. This has never happened at McMurdo, but the logistics team plans for it every year. Backup food stockpiles are rotated and maintained specifically for this scenario. The margin for failure is narrow. Once the ship is docked, the clock starts. The offload operation runs continuously, day and night, until every container is ashore. The weather in Antarctica is unpredictable, even in summer. A storm can close the pier. The sea ice that allows the ship to dock safely can begin breaking up earlier than expected. The window to complete the offload might be 2 weeks, or it might be 5 days. Everyone on the station participates. Scientists who are there to study glaciology or atmospheric chemistry get assigned to cargo lines. Kitchen staff, janitors, and mechanics work shifts moving pallets off the ship and into trucks. It's called all hands, and it's one of the few times during the year when the normal hierarchy of the station disappears. You're not a researcher or a cook or an engineer. You're someone moving boxes. The containers are loaded onto flatbed trucks and driven to heated warehouses near the station's main galley building. Some cargo goes into refrigerated storage, some goes into freezers, but most of it, dry goods, canned food, bulk staples, goes into rooms that look more like industrial distribution centers than kitchens. Inside, the space is dominated by floor-to-ceiling pallet racking. Forklifts move constantly, stacking incoming cargo and pulling older stock forward. The system is organized by category: grains, canned vegetables, canned fruit, dried legumes, baking supplies, condiments, and snacks. Each category has a designated zone and each item is logged manually. There are no barcode scanners in the galley. Inventory is tracked on paper pull sheets. When the kitchen needs flour or rice or canned tomatoes, a steward walks to the warehouse, finds the item on the shelves, records the withdrawal on a clipboard, and hauls it back to the prep area. It's a low-tech system, but it works. The warehouse manager can tell you at any point in the year roughly how much of each staple is left and how long it will last. The offload ends when the last container is ashore and the ship leaves. After that, the station is on its own. For the first few months after the ship departs, McMurdo still has access to air cargo. C-17 Globemasters and LC-130 Ski-Birds fly in from Christchurch, New Zealand, carrying mail, replacement parts, and, most importantly, fresh produce. These flights are called Freshies runs, and they happen about once a week during the summer season. The planes bring lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, apples, oranges, bananas, anything that can survive a few hours in a climate-controlled cargo hold. The produce is packed in insulated tri-wall cardboard containers, sometimes lined with styrofoam or thermal blankets, and loaded onto heated vans the moment the plane lands. If a pallet of lettuce sits on the runway for more than 15 minutes at negative 40 degrees, it freezes solid. When it thaws, it turns into black slime, but the flights don't last. By early March, the weather becomes too severe for routine air operations. Storms are more frequent, temperatures drop, daylight hours shrink, the last plane of the season leaves, and the station enters what's called the winter over period. At the South Pole, which sits at an elevation of 9,300 feet on the polar plateau, the isolation is even more extreme. The Amundsen Scott South Pole Station is completely cut off from the outside world from March through September. No planes can land because the temperature drops to negative 50 or negative 60 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, hydraulic fluid in aircraft landing gear thickens and eventually freezes. Tires become brittle and can shatter on contact with the ground. The air is too thin and too cold for safe flight operations. What this means is that the crew at South Pole, usually around 40 people in winter, has no access to resupply for 6 to 9 months. If someone gets sick, if a critical piece of equipment breaks, if they run out of a particular food item, there is no emergency airlift. They are physically cut off from the rest of the planet. The food they have in storage is all they will have until spring. There are no second chances. The dry goods warehouse at McMurdo is kept at about 15 degrees Celsius, roughly 60 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't for comfort, it's to protect the food. Canned goods are particularly vulnerable to temperature swings. If a can freezes and then thaws, the metal contracts and expands. Seals can fail. The can itself can burst. Even if the can stays intact, repeated freeze-thaw cycles degrade the food inside. The texture changes. Liquids separate. What was supposed to be edible becomes waste, so the warehouse is heated year-round. Even when the outside temperature is negative 40 or colder, the building is insulated and the heating system runs constantly to maintain that 15-degree target. It's one of the largest energy expenditures on the station, but it's non-negotiable. Without stable temperature control, the food supply deteriorates. Inside, the shelves hold food that is often years old. The logistics team maintains a stockpile that can stretch to 2 or 3 years if necessary. This is the backup supply, the reserve that gets used if a ship fails to arrive or if cargo is lost in transit. Dried beans, rice, flour, and canned vegetables can last indefinitely if stored properly. The best buy dates printed on the packaging are treated as suggestions, not hard limits. When a shipment arrives, the oldest stock is rotated to the front. New stock goes to the back. This ensures that nothing sits on the shelf for longer than necessary, but it also means that the kitchen is routinely cooking with ingredients that are well past their commercial expiration dates. The U.S. Army Veterinary Corps or public health officers inspect food when it arrives. If it's frozen or dry sealed, safety is rarely an issue. What changes is quality, texture, taste, and appearance. A chocolate bar from 2018 might be opened in 2024. If it has white spots from fat separation, it gets used for baking brownies instead of being eaten on its own. Chefs shop the warehouse once a week. They bring pull sheets that list what they need, find the items on the shelves, write down what they've taken, and haul it back to the kitchen. The system is manual, but it gives the warehouse manager a constant read on burn rates. By mid-year, they know exactly how much flour is left and whether they need to start stretching it. A standard commercial freezer operates at about -18 to -20 degrees Celsius. That's cold enough to keep meat, vegetables, and dairy products frozen indefinitely without damaging the cellular structure of the food. But in Antarctica, the ambient temperature can drop to -60 degrees Celsius or lower. And at that temperature, food doesn't just freeze, it gets destroyed. The problem is overfreezing. At -60, the moisture that remains in frozen meat and vegetables crystallizes differently. The ice crystals grow larger and more jagged, tearing through cell walls. When the food is eventually thawed and cooked, the texture is wrong. Meat becomes dry and woody. Vegetables turn mushy. It's freezer burn on a catastrophic scale. Fats are also vulnerable. Butter and cheese can become brittle at extreme lows, and the chemical structure begins to break down. Oxidation accelerates. The food becomes rancid faster once it's thawed. Cans can contract so much that the seals fail, exposing the contents to air. So McMurdo uses freezers that are actively heated. The buildings are insulated, and in the winter, heaters turn on to warm the interior up to -20 degrees. A thermometer inside the freezer might read -20. A thermometer outside the door reads -70. The freezer is protecting the food from the cold. It's counterintuitive, but it's necessary. Without active heating, the frozen food supply would be unusable within a few months. At the South Pole, where energy is more constrained, the approach is different. Power at South Pole comes from generators that burn jet fuel, and every watt has to be justified. Heating large freezer buildings would consume too much fuel, so instead, bulk frozen items, whole turkeys, hams, bags of frozen vegetables, are stored outside in crates on snow berms. The food is kept in its packaging and stacked in insulated containers, then buried under snow. The snow acts as a buffer, keeping the temperature more stable, but it's still far colder than a standard freezer. Retrieval is a physical task. A crew member has to dress in full extreme cold weather gear, parka, insulated boots, face mask, gloves, and go outside with a crowbar or sledgehammer. The crates are often frozen into the drift. They have to be pried loose, then sledded back to the station on a cargo sled. Once the food is inside, it can't be used immediately. A turkey that's been sitting at -60 degrees can't go straight into a 200-degree oven. The outside would cook, while the inside stayed frozen solid. So there's a tempering protocol. The turkey is moved to a holding room, kept at about 4 degrees Celsius. It sits there for several days, gradually warming up to a temperature where it can be safely cooked. The process is slow, but it's the only way to avoid ruining the meat. This is the reality of frozen food storage in Antarctica. The cold doesn't make things easier, it makes them harder. By June, McMurdo and the South Pole have been isolated for 3 months. The sun doesn't rise at the South Pole. At McMurdo, there are a few hours of twilight, but the days are still dark and cold. The crew has settled into a routine. Work continues, maintenance, research, data collection, but the psychological strain of isolation is starting to show. Food becomes more important. The galley is the only place on the station that feels like a gathering point. There are no restaurants, no bars, no movie theaters. The galley is where people go to eat, but it's also where they go to see other people, to break up the monotony of the day, to feel like they're part of something communal. Fresh bread is baked daily. The smell is cited by crew members as one of the most important psychological anchors on station. It's a sensory reminder of normal life. Even when the menu is repetitive, pasta, rice, canned vegetables, frozen chicken, the bread is always fresh. But by midwinter, the kitchen is working with a much more limited set of ingredients. The last of the fresh produce is gone. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and leafy greens have been used up. What's left are the hard vegetables: potatoes, onions, carrots, cabbage, squash, and even those are starting to run low. Potatoes are stored in interior cupboards away from exterior walls because if they touch a cold surface, they turn sweet and mushy. The starch converts to sugar and the texture changes. Eggs are another challenge. Fresh shell eggs don't last more than a few weeks in storage, even with careful handling. Some older Antarctic expeditions used to coat fresh eggs in mineral oil to seal the porous shell and prevent spoilage. The eggs had to be rotated weekly so the yolk wouldn't settle and stick to the inside of the shell, which would cause it to rot. But even with this technique, Eggs were a short-term resource. Most stations now rely on liquid egg product, frozen cartons of pre-mixed eggs, or powdered eggs for the bulk of the year. A fried egg or a poached egg with a runny yolk becomes a luxury reserved for special occasions. June 21st is the winter solstice. It's the longest night of the year, and it marks the turning point of the Antarctic winter. From this point forward, the days start getting longer again. The sun will eventually return. It's the most important holiday on the continent. The galley is prepared for weeks. Chefs go through the inventory and identify the absolute best ingredients they have left. Frozen beef tenderloin, lobster tails, truffles, high-quality chocolate, specialty items that were saved specifically for this night. The menu is elaborate: beef Wellington, multi-course meals, desserts that take hours to prepare. And the tradition is that station management, the station leader, the department heads, the lead scientists, serve the crew. The hierarchy is inverted. The people who normally give orders are now waiting tables, pouring water, and clearing plates. It's a symbolic gesture, but it's taken seriously. It reinforces the idea that everyone on the station is part of the same team, that survival depends on mutual respect and shared effort. The meal itself is less about the food and more about what it represents. It's proof that the crew is going to make it, that the worst of the winter is over, that in a few months the planes will start flying again and fresh food will return and the isolation will end. Food, in this context, is not just fuel. It's a psychological tool. It's the thing that keeps morale intact when there's nothing else to look forward to. By August, the kitchen is running on fumes. The stockpile of dry goods is still adequate. There's plenty of rice, flour, pasta, and canned vegetables, but the variety is gone. Meals start to repeat. The same sauces, the same side dishes, the same proteins rotated in a predictable cycle. And the crew notices. There's a phenomenon that people on the station call freshy fever. It's a psychological response to the absence of fresh food. People start dreaming about crunchy textures, about the taste of a raw carrot or a crisp apple, about the smell of citrus. When someone peels an orange in the galley, people stop what they're doing and gather around just to smell it. The small hydroponic greenhouses at McMurdo and South Pole help, but only slightly. The yield is minimal, maybe one salad per person every 2 weeks. The greenhouses are kept at a consistent temperature with grow lights running constantly. But the energy cost is high and the space is limited. You can't feed 100 people with a few shelves of lettuce. But the greenhouses serve another purpose. They're not really about the food, they're about mental health. Crew members volunteer for greenhouse duty not because the station needs more lettuce, but because spending time in a warm, humid room full of green plants under bright lights feels like being somewhere else. It's a break from the sterile white environment of the station. It's a reminder that things grow. Condiments become a source of tension. Hot sauce, ketchup, mustard, soy sauce. These are the first things to run out. And when they do, morale takes a visible hit. It's not the calories that matter. It's the ability to make bland food tolerable. When the sriracha runs out in August, people complain. Arguments start over who used the last bottle and whether the kitchen should have rationed it more carefully. Alcohol is also strictly controlled. Most stations have a ration system, 18 beers per week, or 3 bottles of wine. It's enough to take the edge off, but not enough to cause problems. Hard liquor is either banned outright or heavily restricted. Beer and wine are stored in heated areas because if they freeze, the bottles burst. A stash of whiskey or a good bottle of scotch becomes a highly valued personal reserve. The psychological strain of isolation is cumulative. In February, the crew was excited. By April, they had settled into a routine. By June, they were coping. By August, the cracks are starting to show. People are tired. They're bored. They're sick of the food, sick of the routine, sick of seeing the same faces every day. And then the sun comes back. At the South Pole, it rises in late September. At McMurdo, the first planes start flying again in October. The isolation breaks. Fresh food returns. The cycle starts over. Nothing stays in Antarctica. This is a rule enforced by the Antarctic Treaty System, which governs all human activity on the continent. Every piece of trash, every food scrap, every broken tool or discarded piece of packaging has to be shipped back to the home country. It's called retrograde, and it's one of the most labor-intensive parts of station operations. Waste is sorted into more than 15 categories: soft plastic, hard plastic, aluminum, steel, glass, paper, cardboard, food waste. Each category has its own bin, and the sorting is strict. A piece of plastic that ends up in the food waste bin can result in a station-wide meeting or public shaming. The environmental rules are taken seriously. Food waste is particularly complicated. You can't flush it down a drain because it disrupts the wastewater treatment system. You can't burn it in an open incinerator because that's banned under the treaty, so it has to be processed. Large stations use industrial food dehydrators. The waste is loaded into a machine that heats and dries it, reducing the moisture content until what's left is a sterile, odorless powder that looks like confetti. This food confetti is then packed into drums and shipped back to the US or New Zealand for final disposal. But not all food waste can go into the dehydrator. Bones, chicken wings, steak bones, pork chops can jam the machine. They have to be separated and handled differently, often packed separately for retrograde. It adds an extra step to kitchen operations, but there's no way around it. The result is that Antarctica is one of the most rigorous recycling environments on Earth. There is no throwing things away. Every action has a downstream consequence. Every meal generates waste that someone will have to sort, process, pack, and ship. It's a constant reminder that the continent is a shared resource and that every person on station has a responsibility to leave it exactly as they found it. Feeding a crew in Antarctica isn't a logistics problem that gets solved once. It's a system that has to function continuously, under constraints that would shut down most food supply chains. A single ship delivery, months of isolation, temperatures that destroy the very food they're supposed to preserve, and a crew that depends on that food not just for calories, but for psychological survival. The heated freezer, the manual inventory sheets, the rituals around midwinter dinner, these aren't inefficiencies. They're adaptations. They're the product of decades of experience in an environment where failure means evacuation and where every food decision has to account for a dozen variables that don't exist anywhere else on the planet. The people who manage these systems, who plan the menus, who rotate the stock, who bake the bread every morning, who save the best ingredients for the darkest night of the year, are doing work that most of us will never see. But it's work that makes everything else on the continent possible. Science, research, exploration, none of it happens without someone figuring out how to store a turkey at -60 degrees and turn it into a meal 9 months later.